The General Motors full-size lineup was all new for the 1961 model year. From Chevrolet to Pontiac to Olds to Buick to Cadillac, cars displayed impeccable restraint compared to the late 50s models when it came to chrome trim, but also were extremely stylish. And while all the full-size cars from General Motors in 1961 were extremely good-looking, it's hard to argue that the 1961 Olds Classic 98, as it was owned just for 1 year, was anything but stylish. And underneath its very attractive skin, the new for 1961 Olds Classic 98 had a number of novel features and improvements over the 1959 models. The first difference between the 61s and the previous generation was what Olds called the easy entry doors. For anybody who's driven a 59 or 60 Olds, they know that the overall roof height is relatively low in those vehicles, and you sit pretty low on the ground, almost on the floor like a sports car. That was just the style of the cars for the time, given that the design philosophy was longer, lower, wider. And those cars certainly were longer, lower, and wider. And as a consequence, you sat pretty low in the cabin and also had to stoop down to get in them. This was changed for the 1961 model year, where Olds raised the roofline that provided help with customers getting into the cabin much easier through the quote-unquote easy entry doors. With this new roofline, the body also allowed for significantly more headroom, enough room to wear a hat, as you'll see in a 1961 Olds commercial where they tout the fact that somebody could easily wear a hat in this new Olds, and that admittedly was something that wasn't easy in the 1959 and 60 models. Olds also raised the seats and the seating position for the 1959 and 60 models and called the new 61 Olds cars with chair-high seats, stating that the seating position was up almost 2 inches in most models. This allowed for better leg support and less driving fatigue on long trips. On the chassis side, the cars rode atop a 126-inch wheelbase and featured what Olds called new twin triangle stability, where 4 steel arms were mounted triangularly from the axle housing to the frame, forming a solid support to take what Olds called the tilt out of turns and the dip out of starts and stops for new comfort. The fuel tank location also moved from behind the rear axle to now mounted vertically near the rear axle. This allowed for a very deep trunk well in these vehicles compared to the previous generation, and was a philosophy that Ford employed for many years on full-size cars, even all the way through the last Crown Victorias, Mercury Marquis, and Lincoln Town cars. It wouldn't last, however, on General Motors vehicles past the 1965 model year, as some customers tended to complain that they had to stoop relatively low to get cargo out of the luggage compartment. On the inside of the car, the Classic 98 featured a number of power conveniences standard, including what Olds called Rotomatic power steering and pedal ease power brakes. These, while seemingly not so novel in today's world, were quite novel as standard features for vehicles back in 1961. Buyers could also order a power seat, power windows, or even a power antenna, as Olds said, for their driving pleasure. Interiors also received the new instrument panel and steering wheel, complete with this really sleek recessed hub design for safety. And the speedometer was a rolling drum type that changed colors as your speed increased. Another interesting interior feature is that instead of a parking brake warning light being inside the instrument cluster, the warning light is actually on the parking brake itself and illuminates when the brake is set. The dash speaker was also placed in an interesting position, similar to pre-war era cars, right in the middle of the dash and below the radio and behind these grills that you see right here. It allowed for effective sound and also a neat design element of the overall instrument panel. Under hood, the Classic 98 featured Olds' 394 cubic inch V8, making 325 gross horsepower with a 4-barrel carburetor in standard form. The 98 had the same standard engine as the Super 88, and it developed 75 more horsepower than the engine that came standard in the Dynamic 88s, which was 250 horsepower. It also was 5 less horsepower than the standard engine in the new for 1961 Oldsmobile Starfire, which came in convertible form only for 1961, we will leave a discussion of that particular vehicle to another video. Unfortunately, while Olds' 394 cubic inch engine was indeed an excellent power plant, also under hood, a new for 1961 transmission was featured, and that was the Roto Hydra-Matic, which was employed on all 1961 Oldsmobiles and was also used on some short wheelbase Pontiacs. This new for 61 transmission was extremely troublesome, even when new, and had very strange shifting patterns compared to the typical Hydra-Matic or later Turbo Hydra-Matic transmissions that were put in Olds vehicles. Olds advertised these vehicles as having accelerotor action because of their unique fluid coupling design, but in reality, it didn't deliver anything other than herky-jerky shifts. Some Olds literature calls these transmissions 4-speeds because of the fluid coupling design, but they really have 3 forward gears, and the 1-to-2 shift in particular is extremely jerky, in large part because the transmission goes through a number of complicated operations between this shift and goes from an uncoupled drive to virtually direct drive in second gear. So it's not only a shift, but almost like an early lockup torque converter, although, as I mentioned, this is a fluid coupling in this transmission and not a torque converter. These transmissions also operated under relatively high pressures for the era, which in part caused some of the early failures. It's really unfortunate that these Oldsmobiles are endowed with this transmission because aside from it, the powertrains and overall ride are excellent. Thankfully, several model years later, Olds would eschew the Roto Hydra-Matic and go to the new Turbo Hydra-Matic transmission, which was much smoother and much more durable. Overall, the 1961 Oldsmobile is one sleek design from any angle that you look at it. The car does have some distinguishing features over the 88 models, most particularly the grille and this block lettering spelling Oldsmobile on the hood as opposed to in the grille itself. And the cars were on a longer wheelbase in the 88s as well, 126.3 inches versus 123 inches for the Dynamic 88 and Super 88. If you're looking for one of these Oldsmobiles, let me say that aside from that terrible Roto Hydra-Matic transmission, they do drive extremely well, and they're very comfortable, quiet, and just wonderful driving cars. The 394 cubic inch V8 is extremely peppy, and by this point, brakes on these cars were pretty good, albeit they were still drums, but they stop very quickly and require just a slight depression of the brake pedal to bring the car to a halt quite quickly. Just watch out for potential transmission repairs and make sure that the vehicle that you purchase shifts reasonably well and hopefully has a record of the transmission being rebuilt at some point in its life. Let's now close out this video with 2 commercials from the 1961 Olds. This first one features what we talked about at the front end of the video, most particularly the increased headroom and spaciousness that a buyer would find in this 1961 Olds over the previous model, enabling a driver to wear a hat or not, depending on their choice of fashion for that day.
They like the fashion line design of the 61 Oldsmobile. So they decided to take a test drive. It's the sure way to learn about the full-size comfort and full-size power of Olds for 61. You have to experience that big new Skyrocket engine and Hydra-Matic drive with accelerotor action. You have to see for yourself the way the Skyrocket makes molehills out of mountains, responding eagerly to every command. The way Olds engineered a silent, steady, stable ride through the liberal use of rubber throughout the chassis. And a new idea in suspension, twin triangle stability, that brings out the full benefit of deep coil springs. Action speaks louder than words, as this couple discovered. Tomorrow, why don't you see your Oldsmobile quality dealer? Test the best. Try out a new Dynamic 88, Super 88, or 98. Take the wheel. Drive the 1961 Oldsmobile.
And here's one more ad for the 1961 Oldsmobile, talking about the new roof height and the ability of someone to wear a hat in the car with relative ease.
Now, here's a man who likes hats. Really likes hats. In fact, he's crazy about hats. But up till this year, he hasn't been able to wear one. Why does this year make a difference? There's the answer. His new Oldsmobile Classic 98, with more room at the top for any hat he cares to wear. But hat room is not the only place you gain valuable inches in the Classic 98. There's a full measure of room and comfort throughout. You ride tall in the saddle on higher sit-up seats with thicker foam padding all the way across. And to add to your pleasure underway, there's a new Skyrocket engine and new Hydromatic drive with accelerator action to put new zing in your driving. And thanks to Oldsmobile's exclusive new twin triangle stability, you enjoy the smoothest, steadiest ride ever. A ride cushioned in rubber at more than 90 points. Oldsmobile's Classic 98 is available in 5 models for 1961. Distinctive, distinguished, decidedly new. Your Oldsmobile dealer will be happy to serve you. With or without a hat. See him soon.
Thanks for watching this video on the 1961 Oldsmobile Classic 98. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to help the YouTube algorithm serve it up to more viewers like you. Till next time, check out the video thumbnails at bottom left and right for some suggestions for you. Thanks again for watching, and take care.